cEDH time here. I'm Braden. Today I want to talk about Ian crashing out over Hexing Squelcher. He does say in his video that he's like open to hearing people's ideas. I'm not trying to like dog on him. I'm just giving some actual. He says change my mind, so I'm just gonna kind of approach it with the thought of trying to change his mind. I will say that when Mistrise Village came out and Voice of Victory came out, people were freaking out, and you know they've kind of slotted into the meta perfectly fine. Realistically, are they the most healthy thing? Probably not, but is it like meta-defining game warping, like destroying cEDH? Not really. And I think that the very first thing he talked about in this video was the play patterns. So the play pattern of playing a card, now you just win the game. I mean, that's really cEDH, right? If the card doesn't get countered, you just play a card and win the game. If you're able to, you want to basically get a silence effect on the field first, like a Voice of Victory or Grand Abolisher with the Cavernous Souls aiming human, and then you get that to the field, you win the game. You resolve a silence, you do a small stack battle, and then if that resolves, then you win the game. So typically, right now, the cEDH meta, it literally is turn 1, you're gonna tutor for your engine, your value engine. For example, we'll name Rhystic Study, but if you're not on Rhystic for some reason, or you have an opening hand where you don't have the ability to get a Rhystic, you can think of like a Lotho with an Esper, or like a Fairy Mastermind and a Smothering Tithe, or a Fairy Mastermind and a Lotho, and like any like Fish plus an Esper, or Fish plus a Lotho, like any of these combinations of cards, you want to get roughly a Rhystic Study worth of value on the field by turn 2. That's like your goal. Turn 3, that turn 2 pass into like that turn 3, you're really just drawing as many cards as you possibly can and creating as many treasures as you possibly can to accrue that value. And that way on your turn 3 and on your turn 4, you can really threat assess the table and you can decide how you want to use your resources. If you have the ability to be like Cavernous Souls naming human, Grand Abolisher, win the game, that's what you can try to do. If people are able to disrupt that somehow, then you need to pass and then continue recurring value for the next round. But basically, tutor for your engine, play your engine, find a silence effect, resolve the silence effect, and win the game. That's been the cEDH meta for over 2 years. Like that's the best thing you can do in cEDH. And Blue Farm is a clear example of why it's really good and why it's OP. And that kind of leads me to my next thing. Is he talked about how stax isn't good right now in cEDH, and that's just not true. Like stax is broken in cEDH. It's been the best thing in cEDH for years. Like Rhystic Study, Smothering Tithe, Bowmasters, Fairy Mastermind, Lotho, Mayhem Devil. These are all stax pieces. The thing is they're not the stax piece that people think of. It's like 1 card per turn. No, those are like the shitty stax pieces. All the good stax pieces are seen in top cEDH. And then he talks about how turbo and stacks and like mid-range all need to like balance each other out. Well, yeah, that's Blue Farm. Like Blue Farm does everything that he listed there. It staxes, it has amazing mid game, and it has the ability to turbo if it needs to. A good cEDH deck has all 3 of those things built into it. Linear gameplay of like Magda or Lumra, so boring, not fun. That's like optimized bracket 4. It's really not. It's not fun. It's boring. But when you sit at a table and it's like, okay, I'm going against this, I'm going against that, I'm going against this. Okay, what's my goal this game? My deck can do X, Y, and Z. It can do turbo. It can do stacks. It can do like mid-range grind. It can do everything. So what's like my choice I'm going to do with my agency? How am I going to try to get my mulligan? What am I looking for? Like all of that comes down to playing the best cards. So like 5-color good stuff, and like you have Blue Farm, like that. Those things allow you to do and make those choices. So I think this card fits the meta perfectly. It allows other decks to have that same play pattern of like get your value engine on the field and then turbo out without being in white. So it gives Grixis a pretty good way to protect itself. VV, it gives VV a nice way to protect itself, where typically they couldn't really get a silence effect unless it was Conqueror's Flail and Defense Grid. So like typically, like if I think about it, Hexing Squelcher, not that bad. You can deal with it when it resolves. You can deal with it on the stack, like with a Mindbreak Trap. Totally could deal with it on the stack. However, when it resolves, there's so many things you can do. Like, you can still cast spells. This is way less oppressive than a Grand Abolisher or a Voice of Victory. Grand Abolisher, you can't even crack a fucking treasure. Like, you have to hope that there's a Mayhem Devil on the field and you have 2 fetch lands that you can crack to kill the Grand Abolisher. With this, you can use Mayhem Devils with anything that can sacrifice. You can activate and sacrifice and kill this thing. Bowmasters, you can cast a spell. Even if their spells can't be countered, at least the Ristic Study player gets to draw a card when they cast a spell, and the Bowmaster can, like, ping and kill it. So there's lots of ways you can deal with it. Also, like, Kinnan doesn't have access to Hexing Squelcher, but Kinnan also does have Hullbreaker Horror, which can bounce this off the stack. So who knows? Maybe Wizards is going to make a bunch of new spells or add new spells to the game that bounce things off the stack, or maybe even change the order in which things resolve on the stack, which would be really cool. So I don't know. Like, I understand that, like, the hype of, like, hey, this card might be too OP is kind of an emotional thing right now. It's a fresh card. It just came out. I've been playtesting it for a while since it was spoiled, and really it hasn't changed how fun and OP cEDH is. And I think that soon the community will realize it's really not as big of a boogeyman as people make it think. My biggest problem with the card is that it says this spell can't be countered, ward pay 2 life, spells you control can't be countered, other creatures you control have ward pay 2 life, when in reality they should have just said this spell can't be countered, spells you control can't be countered, ward pay 2 life, other creatures you control have ward pay 2 life. I don't know why they, like, switched it out. They should have just made them all simple. It's, for some reason, my mind just I don't like how they did it. But it's fine. Besides that, card looks amazing. Art looks great. Matthew looks like he's the one who did this. Fantastic job. I like it. Yeah, solid card. I think it's going to give some other decks in the format the ability to compete with Blue Farm. I like how in the video here he talks about how Blue Farm isn't technically the only, like, top deck anymore, with, like, an asterisk on that, when in reality that's just not true. Like, people are just playing other things, but in reality Blue Farm is the best. There's no doubt. Like, no one seriously thinks that there's better things than Blue Farm. So except for Cruxilus, the Magecraft one, not the crappy decks people take to tournaments, but the Magecraft is pretty OP, and yeah, and of course the Clue Farm, but not like the Turbo variant, just like the Blue Farm Good Stuff variant that has all silence effects. So that one's really good because you can also run Flare Denial. Anyway, it's a whole nother conversation. But those decks do really well into Blue Farm. The other decks in the meta really don't do that great. Hopefully this gives 5-color Good Stuff piles some extra oomph into Blue Farm. And with that, hopefully some of those points break through the emotion here, and you're able to see that Hexing Squelcher really isn't that bad in the format. And if Hexing Squelcher is that bad in the format, then we also need to talk about banning Grand Abolisher and Voice of Victory and Ranger Captain of Eos, probably. So I think we can all agree that Silence and Orm's Chant are totally fine, because those are spells on the stack that you can interact with and deal with. But typically, like you said, Force of Will and Mindbreak Trap are really the only thing that really hit creatures. There are very few good creature counter spells in general, and that's why some decks play a lot of creatures, because they're harder to interact with, like Magda. And even if Magda said the spell can't be countered, it wouldn't even be a big deal. Like, you just get a OBM, and now Magda can't play the game. The reality is Magda will never live up to, like, the real hype of cEDH, the real top end, with Blue Farm playing at the table. If you have 3 Blue Farm players and a Magda, that Magda is rarely going to get an actual true win in. The games are always going to go to draws, or a Blue Farm player is going to win with, like, a silence effect. That's just the reality of it, and I think you would be very difficult to prove otherwise. But yeah, this card, not a big deal. That's it. Have a good night, guys. Also, last thing, just because the spells aren't counterable doesn't mean you can't redirect them. So maybe the Wizards is going to make more redirect spells, so that way you can still manipulate what the player's doing. It won't be like a bulletproof solution, but it does still help to know that you can redirect the uncounterable spells at least. That's it.